He was just our dentist. That's all he was ever supposed to be. A man with a calm voice and clean hands, someone who asked about flossing habits and reminded us to avoid too much coffee. My name is Emma. I'm 42. Married, as long as it made sense. 2 kids who still needed me but didn't know it, a kitchen that was always slightly too clean, and a life built out of appointments, apps, and recipes saved for later. I teach part-time at the high school, organize carpools, manage birthdays, school forms, dinner plans, and the growing silence between me and the man I married. Our dentist's name was Dr. Lewis. We'd been seeing him for 6 years. My husband picked him when our old dentist retired. It was a practical choice. The office was close, the hours worked with our schedules, the reviews were good, and Dr. Lewis was the kind of professional who kept his voice low and his eyes steady. You could tell he was trained to put people at ease. Young, maybe mid to late 30s, sharp, but not too polished. He wore the kind of expression that made you feel like you didn't need to be embarrassed. He never looked at me twice. Not once in 6 years. And I liked that about him. Because it made things simple, predictable, uncomplicated. But on that Wednesday morning, everything felt slightly off. The appointment was early. I'd taken the first available slot. My husband had a meeting, and we usually scheduled these things together, back to back, one of us in the chair while the other skimmed magazines or scrolled through emails. It was routine, part of the choreography of our domestic life. But this time I went alone. I hadn't slept much the night before. It wasn't just restlessness or hormones or too much coffee after dinner. It was a different kind of insomnia, the kind that threads itself into your spine and whispers half-formed thoughts into your pillow. I had lain there staring at the ceiling fan, at the faint play of streetlight shadows on the wall, trying not to name the reason. Because I knew. It wasn't a dream keeping me up. It was a memory. A recent one. A moment I hadn't told anyone about. A fragment of an afternoon that stayed under my skin like a splinter. A hand that had lingered too long. A voice that had been too close to my ear. A choice I never spoke aloud but made all the same. Still, I got dressed like any other day. Clean blouse. Slacks that fit without effort. A ponytail because there was no point in trying too hard. It was just a cleaning. Just 20 minutes in a chair with my mouth open and my eyes somewhere else. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't need to. No one would be looking. The receptionist greeted me like always, smiling too wide for that early in the morning, but I smiled back. It was automatic. A reflex. The same smile I used at parent-teacher conferences and grocery checkouts. Polite. Contained. The office was still quiet. Just the low hum of music piped through the speakers, something instrumental and inoffensive. The smell was familiar, antiseptic and mint. Everything was clean. Controlled. I sat in the chair and adjusted the paper bib without being asked. I knew the routine. I knew what to expect. I had already calculated the minutes. 5 for the assistant, 10 for the cleaning, 5 for the final check. In and out. Done. But when Dr. Lewis walked in, something shifted. Not visibly. Not loudly. He walked in like he always did. Quiet. Focused. He glanced at my file, said, "Morning, Emma," and I nodded. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't frowning either. Just neutral. And then he looked at me. Not at my chart. Not at my teeth. At me. His eyes met mine and held. Just for a second. But longer than they should have. And something in me broke, quietly, like a crack in glass that you can't see unless the light hits it just right. He didn't say anything. Just moved to wash his hands, pulled on the gloves, adjusted the overhead light. But that pause lived under my skin now. It wouldn't leave. He tilted the chair back, and I let him. My body folded into the familiar position, mouth open, chin tilted, vulnerable without permission. He began the cleaning. Mirror, pick, rinse. His hands moved with practiced care, but I was aware of every motion. Every time his fingers brushed my skin, even through the gloves. And my body, it remembered. Not him. Someone else. A different day. A different hallway. A conversation that started with laughter and ended in silence. A moment where his hand met my shoulder and stayed. Too long. Where my breath caught and I didn't pull away. Where nothing happened. But everything did. I hadn't told anyone. Not even myself, not properly. I had folded it into my body like an extra rib, something I could pretend wasn't there. But now, Dr. Lewis said nothing. He kept working. But when he tapped the back of my molar and paused, I felt it. "You've been grinding," he said, softly. I nodded. It wasn't a question. But then he added, "Any stress lately?" I wanted to laugh, but my lips twitched and no sound came. Because how do you say that your stress isn't a thing, but a person? A breath. A nearness. A maybe that didn't happen but won't go away. I didn't answer. He didn't push. But in the silence, I felt it. He knew. Not everything. Not the details. But something. Something in the way my jaw had hardened. In the wear on my back teeth. In the way my breath had changed in the chair. He saw it. And I couldn't close my mouth. Not just because he was still cleaning. Because I didn't know how to seal that part of myself shut again. The part he had already seen. He leaned me back. That was all it took. No sound. No words. Just the slow, mechanical motion of the chair descending beneath me, the world tilting in a familiar, practiced rhythm that should have meant nothing. But it did. It meant too much. Because there is something about lying flat on your back, beneath a white light, with the ceiling close and a body standing above you, that makes everything else slip away. You become just a mouth. Just an opening. Just a place to be entered by tools and silence and questions you can't answer. He adjusted the light. I kept my eyes fixed on the corner of the ceiling where 2 panels didn't quite line up. I counted the small cracks in the paint. 1, 2, 3. I told myself to breathe slowly. In. Out. Normal. I could feel his hands moving near my face. The soft slide of latex, the quiet clink of metal. He didn't speak for the first few minutes. Just the gentle scrape of a scaler against enamel, the light tap-tap-tap that should have been routine but landed different. Every tiny sound echoed too loud in the space between us. I could hear my own breath, the pulse in my ears, the swallow I tried not to make. And then, he stopped. Not for long. Just for a heartbeat. But it was enough. His hands hovered. The tool paused midair. And I felt it. His eyes on me. Not on my teeth. On me. And when he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "You've been grinding," he said. I didn't nod. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't sure how to move. He didn't say it like an observation. He said it like a sentence. Like he already knew why. And then he added, gently, carefully, as if peeling something back, "Any stress lately?" Stress. The word rang in my ears. Stress. A bland term. A placeholder. A word used to describe bills and deadlines and dishes and sleeplessness. But what do you say when the thing keeping you up at night isn't a thing at all? What do you call it when the problem is a silence you keep returning to? A look you remember too clearly. A feeling that followed you out of a room you should never have walked into. I wanted to close my eyes. To disappear. To press rewind on the morning and go back to bed. To cancel the appointment. To never come in at all. But I didn't. I lay there. Mouth open. Body still. My hands clenched together in my lap under the paper bib, folded so tightly I could feel the press of my wedding ring digging into my own skin. I tried to answer. Tried to make a sound. But the only name in my throat wasn't one I could say. It wasn't Dr. Lewis. It wasn't my husband. It was someone else. Someone I'd seen too often, too recently. Someone who had leaned just a little too close. Who had touched the back of my hand in a way that wasn't accidental. Who had looked at me like he knew I wouldn't stop him, and I hadn't. Not really. Because stopping something isn't the same as pretending it didn't start. And now here I was, pinned under a light, mouth open. And a stranger, with soft hands and a quiet voice, looking down at me as if he could read every crack. He didn't ask again. He didn't need to. He worked in silence after that. Measured, focused, careful. But something had changed. His shoulders pulled tighter. His hands moved more slowly. He didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. And every second stretched. Because I knew what he saw. Not details. Not facts. But signs. The way my molars showed where. The small cuts inside my cheek from biting back tension. The raw edge of my breath when I tried not to make a sound. He saw the shape of something I hadn't confessed. He saw it in my body. In the places where secrets store themselves when you're too careful to say them aloud. And maybe he didn't mean to see. But he did. And I couldn't undo it. By the time he took off his gloves, the air between us had thickened. Not with judgment. Not with threat. Just with knowing. And the worst part wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. Because he looked at me one last time. And I felt everything I'd been hiding shift like sand. And still, neither of us spoke. Because we both knew the moment had already happened. And there was no taking it back. There are moments when a voice is the least important part of a conversation. Sometimes it's the silence that names everything. He didn't say much after that. He finished the cleaning with a kind of careful detachment I hadn't noticed before, though I realized too late it wasn't detachment at all. It was precision. Purpose. He was choosing every gesture, every moment of eye contact or lack of it, every breath that fell between us, like he knew that the room had changed shape and we were both pretending it hadn't. His hands were steady, but his movements had lost the casual rhythm that had once made his presence disappear. That invisibility, the kind that makes a dentist, a stranger with a title, a service provider who never crosses over into memory, was gone. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just in me. When he peeled off his gloves, the sound was sharp. Not loud, but definite. It felt like a door closing or a chapter turning without permission. The latex snapped as if to mark something final, though I didn't yet know what. He didn't speak right away. He wrote something down in my chart, pen moving slowly, deliberately. And I sat up without being told, because my body was no longer following protocol, it was responding to something older. Older than dental appointments and appointment reminders and marriage, even. Older than responsibility. My body was listening to a signal I didn't remember tuning into. And then he looked at me. Not long, but not casually either. And I think I already knew what he was going to say before he said it. I think I had known since the moment he adjusted the light and our eyes met for a fraction too long. There's something in the way a person blinks when they see something they recognize but weren't supposed to find. He said, softly, deliberately, like every syllable mattered. "You're not sleeping well." I didn't answer. He continued, as if I had. "I can see it in your jaw." And then, even quieter, almost like he was speaking to the room itself, not me. "Tell him it's not about cavities." That was all. That was everything. Because he didn't say who. He didn't say what. He didn't point. He didn't accuse. He didn't question. But I felt the floor under me rearrange itself. I felt my heart stutter. Not like fear. Not quite. Like exposure. Like someone had peeled back the skin of my routines and found the place where my truth had curled into itself and waited to be forgotten. I stared at the counter. The tray. The mirror. The harsh, unfiltered reflection of myself. Pale. Overcorrected. My mouth slightly open, as if I still hadn't learned how to shut it. As if I was trying to find a shape for something unspeakable. He didn't move. Didn't reach for me. Didn't even look sorry. And somehow that made it worse. Or better. I didn't know. Because he wasn't pitying me. He was just seeing me. Exactly as I was. I think that's what undid me. Not what he said. But what he didn't. Because everything I had buried in my silence, everything I'd folded into my day-to-day like a bruise hidden under sleeves, was right there in my mouth. In my sleep. In the tightness of my jaw. And he had read it like it was his job. Which, in some way, maybe it was. Maybe the body always tells the truth, even when you've built your life around keeping it quiet. I stood too quickly. The paper bib tore. I fumbled with it, tossed it awkwardly in the bin. He didn't help. He didn't offer to. He just watched. Still as glass. I thanked him, voice thin, faint. He nodded once. Not warm, not cold, just final. And I left the room. But I didn't leave what had happened. Because what happened had nothing to do with words. It had to do with being seen. Not admired. Not desired. Not comforted. Seen. And sometimes, that's the worst kind of intimacy. Because there's no undoing it. I walked to the front desk. I didn't look back. The receptionist asked if I wanted to schedule another cleaning. I smiled. Told her I'd call. But we both knew I wouldn't. My fingers shook when I took out my wallet. I paid without looking at the total. I signed my name like I was faking it. And then I walked outside. The light was too bright. The sky too sharp. The world had tilted, slightly, like the chair I'd been in, like everything was still off balance. I sat in my car and stared ahead. The keys stayed in my hand. But I didn't turn the ignition. Not right away. Because I needed to sit with it. With the fact that I'd been found out. Not by my husband. Not by the person whose hand had lingered where it shouldn't have. But by someone who was never supposed to notice. By someone who was just supposed to clean my teeth. But instead, had seen the way my silence had reshaped me. And I couldn't pretend anymore that the pain was just in my mouth. Because he knew. And worse. Now, so did I. I left the building with my body still moving in pieces, as if the instructions had been written somewhere distant and delayed. Step. Breathe. Hold your keys. Smile at the receptionist. Don't look back. Do not, under any circumstances, look back. But inside, everything had paused. The moment I walked out the door, the noise of the world hit me like a wave, cars passing, birds arguing in the trees, the soft cough of someone stepping outside for a phone call. It was all ordinary. Incredibly, insultingly ordinary. And yet I felt like I was walking through it naked. Not literally, of course. But peeled. Paper thin. Overexposed. I got into my car and closed the door, and for a few seconds, I just sat there. Hands on the steering wheel. Mouth closed. Eyes wide. 10 seconds. 20. A minute. Maybe more. The engine was off. The silence was thick. My heart was louder than the traffic. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding everything inside me until someone saw it. And not just anyone. Not my husband, who shared my bed and my calendar and my dinner plans. Not the person who shouldn't have touched me, whose name I didn't dare say in the dark. Not a friend. Not even someone who loved me. A dentist. He was just our dentist. A man trained to clean. Restore. Polish. Numb. But instead, he saw me. And he didn't look away. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. The leather was warm from the sun. I closed my eyes and let the weight of that moment press into my skin. He hadn't touched me. Hadn't accused me. Hadn't even asked a real question. But he left a sentence in the air and walked away. and now it lived in my mouth like a coin I couldn't spit out. Tell him it's not about cavities. I heard it over and over. In my jaw, in my spine, in the places that only a woman knows how to tense without anyone noticing. I drove home without remembering the turns. Parked in front of my house and stared at the door for so long, I half expected it to open on its own. When I walked in, everything looked the same. Of course it did. The kitchen counter had its usual clutter: school papers, unopened mail, a half-finished crossword. The fridge hummed like it always did. My husband was upstairs. I could hear the creak of the floorboards. Normal. Everything was normal. Except I wasn't. I wasn't even close. I walked to the sink, ran the water, watched it swirl. What did he see? I kept asking myself that. What exactly gave me away? Was it the wear on my molars? The tiny fissures in my enamel? The way I flinched when he touched the left side of my jaw? Or was it something else? Something less visible. The slight tremor in my fingers. The way I swallowed too often. The way I answered questions without answering anything at all. And why did it matter? Why did I care what he saw? Because it made it real. And until then, I'd been so careful to pretend it wasn't. I made dinner that night. Pasta. Garlic bread. The kids argued about screen time. My husband asked if I remembered to pick up the dry cleaning. I said yes. I smiled. I cleared the dishes. I laughed at a joke I didn't hear, but inside, I was still in that chair. Still staring at the ceiling. Still wondering what it meant to be seen that clearly by someone who had no right to see you at all. Or maybe the right had nothing to do with it. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe we can't control who sees us. We only control what we do afterward. That night, I went into the bathroom after everyone was asleep. I turned on the light, looked in the mirror, and this time, I didn't avoid my reflection. I studied it, the faint lines around my mouth, the shadow under one eye, the softness of my jaw, and I thought, maybe I am not a woman unraveling. Maybe I am a woman waking up from a life that looked perfect but felt empty. Waking up from a silence I agreed to live in. Waking up to the fact that I let something happen. Not because I wanted it, but because I didn't stop it. And that's the truth I saw in Dr. Lewis's eyes. That I had crossed something. And I couldn't uncross it. He never called me. Never followed up. He didn't need to. Because I already knew. I canceled my next appointment in the app. Deleted his number from the contacts list. But I still think about him. Not in the way you might think. Not with longing. Not with regret. With stillness. With gratitude, even. Because he didn't give me shame. He gave me clarity. He handed me a mirror and walked away. And now I see myself. Not the woman who smiled and said everything was fine. But the one who finally knows what the truth tastes like. And it tastes like silence. It tastes like waking up at 2 a.m. and not grinding your teeth. It tastes like no longer needing to pretend. He was just our dentist. But he saw too much, and thank God he did.